The day had started like any other, until the world exploded around her. Caroline Pierce, the CEO of one of the largest tech firms, sat in her pristine office, overlooking the sprawling city. The sun had barely begun its ascent, casting a golden glow across her polished desk. Her fingers wrapped around the handle of her coffee mug, but she felt nothing as she took the first sip. Her phone buzzed violently, a harsh interruption to the morning calm. A single email subject: breaking news, your company at the center of scandal. Her stomach twisted, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The screen blinked back at her a detailed exposé on her company's alleged misconduct. The images were damning, the words even worse. She slammed her mug onto the desk, spilling the coffee, her hands now trembling. Caroline had built her empire from the ground up, step by step, and now it was on the verge of crumbling. Her first instinct was to call her trusted team, but as the phone's notifications flooded in, messages, calls, alerts, it became clear there was no time. She was already under siege. Her mind raced. The stakes were too high. She couldn't let this ruin everything she'd worked for. She had to act fast, but where to begin? Who could she trust? The world outside seemed to spin faster, the city below a blur as she stared at her reflection in the glass, seeing a woman who was now completely alone in the battle for her legacy. As the panic from the news settles in, Caroline knows she can't afford to be passive. She calls a meeting with her executive team, hoping to steer the company through the crisis. The boardroom, once a place of triumph, now feels like a battlefield. Each face around the table is filled with uncertainty, except for the betrayer, who seems unnervingly calm. They all wait for Caroline's next move, but the stakes have never been higher. The weight of the company's future rests on her shoulders, and the decisions made here will determine if she can recover or if the empire she built will collapse. But with trust eroding and the pressure mounting, Caroline realizes she may not have the allies she thought she did. The meeting is tense, the silence heavy. Caroline speaks, but her words feel like they don't carry the weight they once did. The team has questions, doubts, but no one is willing to speak up. Her closest confidant, her loyal CFO, suggests immediate action, a public statement to quell the storm. But deep down, Caroline knows this isn't enough. She needs a plan, something bolder, something that will assure the company's future. But as the meeting drags on, she can't shake the feeling that someone in this room is quietly preparing to stab her in the back. The meeting ends with no clear solution. Caroline returns to her office, the weight of failure pressing down on her. Her team is divided, and her trusted CFO's eyes seem colder than ever. Alone in her office again, Caroline feels the isolation that comes with leadership. The city outside continues to buzz, oblivious to the storm inside. The next move is hers, but she knows that whatever comes next will demand more than just strategy. It will demand personal sacrifice. As Caroline prepares for the next day's challenges, she looks over the news again. The scandal isn't going away. It's only getting worse. She opens the email from her mentor, a former CEO, who once warned her about the cost of ambition. Don't let it consume you, the message reads. Caroline closes her eyes, feeling the weight of those words. She's come too far to back down now. The battle isn't over. It's just begun. The meeting was off to a tense start. Caroline Pierce, though accustomed to high-pressure situations, could feel the weight of the betrayal building inside her. Across from her, Mark Thomas, the CFO, sat with an unnerving calm. He was the one she trusted the most, the one who had stood by her through thick and thin. But there was something in his eyes now, a coldness, a distance, that she couldn't ignore. His words were carefully measured, his tone reassuring, but they didn't comfort her. Instead, they made her feel uneasy. Well, get through this, Mark said. The public will forget this in a few weeks. But Caroline knew better. This wasn't just a corporate setback. It was the unraveling of everything she had worked for. As the meeting continued, she noticed that Mark's suggestions were more about preserving the company's image than actually solving the problem. He was already preparing for the fallout, but was it to protect the company or himself? Caroline's instinct screamed that something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The betrayal she feared was drawing closer with every passing minute. As the meeting progresses, Caroline's unease grows. She notices the subtle shifts in her colleagues' behavior. Some eyes avoid hers, while others dart around the room nervously. It's as if they're all waiting for the inevitable to happen. Mark's calm demeanor only amplifies the unease she feels. He's hiding something, she is sure of it. Caroline takes a deep breath and tries to focus. "We need to act fast," she says, her voice steady despite the chaos raging inside her. "I want every department to prepare for a public statement. We need transparency, and we need it now." But as she speaks, she can't shake the feeling that Mark is already looking beyond this crisis. What was he planning? Was he already securing his own position? Was he positioning himself as the next CEO? These thoughts gnaw at her, making her question her own decisions. For the first time, Caroline wonders if the walls are closing in on her from within, not just from the media. Later that day, Caroline sits alone in her office, staring at the reports on her desk. The weight of the world seems to press down on her shoulders, and the walls of her once impenetrable empire now feel fragile. She picks up the phone and calls her mentor, a retired CEO who had once warned her about the dangers of blind trust. "I need your help," she says, her voice raw. The mentor listens, then speaks carefully. "The people closest to you, Caroline, they're the ones you need to watch out for. Ambition changes people. Be careful who you trust." As the call ends, Caroline feels a chill run down her spine. The words linger in her mind. Her mentor was right. In the world of corporate power, allies were just as dangerous as enemies. She had built this empire on trust, but now, trust was what would destroy her. The next day, Caroline meets with her legal team to discuss the impending fallout. The room is tense, with everyone speaking in hushed tones as they try to formulate a strategy. The media is already turning on her, and the pressure is mounting from all sides. But it's not the media that scares her now. It's the silence within her own company. She looks around the table, but even her most trusted advisors seem hesitant, unsure of the right move. It feels as if no one is willing to take the first step. As the hours pass, Caroline realizes that the stakes have risen higher than she could have anticipated. Mark's influence has been growing within the company, and she can't shake the nagging suspicion that he is positioning himself to take control. If she doesn't act soon, she might lose not just the company, but the respect of her entire team. That evening, Caroline stands by the large windows of her office, staring out at the city. The glowing lights of the skyscrapers below seem like a distant memory, as the weight of her situation presses in. Her phone buzzes with another text from Mark. "I've got everything under control." But Caroline isn't so sure anymore. Her trust in him is crumbling, and the feeling of betrayal is undeniable. As she contemplates her next move, she realizes something she hadn't considered before: her position at the top might not be as secure as she thought. Power shifts quickly, and the corporate world is unforgiving. Tomorrow, she will make her choice, but right now, she needs to face the reality that she might be fighting a war on two fronts: against her enemies and against the man who was once her closest ally. The corporate world has never been kind, but Caroline Pierce could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. The manipulative rival, Lawrence Kingsley, had begun to assert his dominance in subtle ways. At first, it was just rumors, small whispers in the hallways, quiet suggestions that Caroline wasn't fit to lead. But Lawrence was a master at controlling the narrative. His charm, his calculated smile, and the way he worked the room made him irresistible. Caroline had always admired his business acumen, but now she saw it for what it truly was: manipulation. Lawrence wasn't just a rival. He was playing a game that Caroline hadn't even realized she was part of. She couldn't help but feel the tension growing between them. Every time their paths crossed, there was an unspoken challenge in the air. Caroline had always prided herself on her ability to read people, but Lawrence was different. He was a shadow in the room, always just out of reach. As Caroline sat in her office, staring at the corporate reports, she realized she was up against more than just a business rival. She was facing someone who was determined to take her down piece by piece, and he wasn't going to stop until he had everything. The following day, Caroline's suspicions are confirmed. Lawrence meets with her in her office, his demeanor as charming as ever. He compliments her on the strides the company has made, but his words feel hollow, like they're laced with something more sinister. "You've done well, Caroline," he says, "but maybe it's time to let go. The pressure is too much for one person, don't you think?" Caroline tries to maintain her composure, but the insinuation stings. It's clear now Lawrence doesn't just want to beat her. He wants her out. His casual tone doesn't mask the underlying threat. As he leaves her office, Caroline can't shake the feeling that the next phase of his plan is already in motion. She watches him walk away, his back straight, his steps measured. He's playing a long game, and she's just another piece on his chessboard. Caroline can feel the pressure mounting with each passing day. She begins to question every decision she's made, every move she's taken. Her team, once loyal, is now fractured. Rumors of Lawrence's influence within the company have started to spread, and it feels like the walls are closing in. As she stands in front of the mirror, preparing for yet another high-stakes meeting, she sees the weight of the situation reflected in her eyes. Her confidence is faltering. She has always been in control, but now she's no longer sure who's controlling the narrative. In every corner of the company, Lawrence's shadow looms larger. He's planting seeds of doubt, and every word he speaks is carefully crafted to erode her power. But Caroline is not one to give up without a fight. She knows she must act, but her options are limited. Lawrence is ruthless, and it feels like her every move is being countered before she even makes it. At the next board meeting, Lawrence takes his place at the table with an air of superiority. He speaks with authority, suggesting strategic moves that will position the company for growth. But Caroline senses a hidden agenda. The more he speaks, the more it becomes clear that he's not just trying to advance the company. He's trying to position himself as the new leader. Caroline fights the rising frustration in her chest. She challenges his ideas, questioning his methods and intentions. But Lawrence doesn't flinch. He calmly counters every objection she raises, playing the role of the calm, collected leader. It's a performance, but it's one that's working. Caroline feels her power slipping away with every word he speaks. She can't let him win. But the room is filled with people who are listening to him more intently than to her. As the meeting continues, she realizes the depth of his manipulation. He's already won over the board, and it's only a matter of time before he takes control. Later that evening, Caroline sits alone in her office, looking over the meeting notes. The battle she's fought for so long is no longer just about business. It's about survival. She's not just fighting for her company. She's fighting for her identity. Every decision, every compromise has led to this moment. But Lawrence is winning, and she can't afford to let him take everything from her. She needs to make a move, but she knows it's a dangerous one. The cost of failure is too high. She opens her phone and looks at the messages from her loyal confidants, but even their words of support seem distant. Caroline takes a deep breath, steadying herself. She can't give up now. But as the night stretches on, she begins to wonder, what if Lawrence was right? What if she's been too blinded by ambition to see that the world has already changed? The company had been in chaos for weeks, but in the midst of it all, a quiet underdog emerged. Ethan Walker, a mid-level executive, had always been overlooked, a silent presence in the background. But now, in the face of Caroline's growing isolation, he was becoming something more. He saw the cracks in the foundation before anyone else did, and he began to work from within, building alliances where others saw only enemies. As whispers of rebellion spread throughout the company, Ethan took advantage of the opportunity to rise. It wasn't about power, at least not in the way Caroline saw it. It was about survival. With Lawrence's rise and Caroline's desperation, Ethan saw the perfect storm for his ascension. The higher-ups had grown complacent, and Ethan, ever the patient strategist, was ready to take his turn in the spotlight. His mind was already racing with plans. Caroline might still have the title, but Ethan knew something she didn't. The real battle had just begun. The underdog's rise was not immediate, but it was unmistakable. Ethan's ability to understand the underlying currents within the company began to pay off. He knew who to talk to, who to trust, and most importantly, who to avoid. One evening, after a grueling round of meetings, he found himself speaking to Sophia Miller, the company's head of marketing. She was sharp, ambitious, and, like Ethan, fed up with the direction things were headed. As they spoke, their frustrations with the company's current leadership came to light. They were aligned not in goals, but in their disillusionment with the system they had long been part of. "We could do this," Sophia said, her voice low but resolute. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. This was the moment of no return. Together they could change everything. With a plan in motion, they would begin to quietly, but steadily, gather support. What started as a whisper would soon become a roar. As Ethan and Sophia continued their quiet campaign, the ripple effects began to take hold. It wasn't long before other employees, those who had long been disillusioned by the corporate hierarchy, started to join their cause. The underdog movement was gaining traction, but it was also becoming dangerous. As more individuals lent their support, the whispers grew louder, and soon the divide within the company became undeniable. Caroline had her supporters, but Ethan's group was quickly becoming a formidable force, speaking to the frustrations of those who had been overlooked for too long. Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before they would face Caroline directly. He had never been one for confrontation, but now, with the backing of a growing faction, he was ready. His vision wasn't just about taking control. It was about bringing change, real change, to a company that had become stagnant under old leadership. But every move he made was calculated, and one wrong step could cost him everything. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. Caroline was called into an emergency meeting with the board of directors. When she walked into the room, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Lawrence was already there, his presence commanding the room as he sat at the head of the table. But to Caroline's surprise, Ethan was there too. He stood near the back of the room, his arms crossed, his gaze unwavering. The meeting started, but Caroline could feel the shift. Lawrence, always the master manipulator, made his move, outlining a strategy that would see him taking control of the company. The board members nodded, but something about the situation didn't feel right. Caroline glanced at Ethan, who returned her gaze with a look of quiet determination. He wasn't just a pawn in this game. He was part of the new order. It became clear to Caroline in that moment, Ethan had taken her place in the game she had played for so long. She was no longer the one calling the shots. In the aftermath of the meeting, Caroline sat alone in her office, the weight of defeat heavy on her shoulders. The empire she had built from the ground up now seemed like a distant memory, fading with each passing hour. She had fought hard, but she had been outplayed. Lawrence had used her, Ethan had outmaneuvered her, and now she was left with nothing but the remnants of her ambition. She had underestimated the strength of those she had left in the shadows, and now it was too late to regain control. Caroline closed her eyes, feeling the enormity of the loss settling in. But even in defeat, something stirred within her. She couldn't walk away. Not yet. There was still a chance to turn the tide, but it would require more than just corporate strategy. It would require something far deeper. Caroline had always been a fighter, and the fight was far from over. Caroline sat alone in her office, staring at the screen in front of her. The weight of her decisions hung heavily on her shoulders. It had been days since the boardroom battle, and though she had regained a semblance of control, she could still feel the cracks in her authority. It was a constant struggle to hold on to her position. In her desperation, Caroline reached out to her former mentor, Victor Hayes, a retired CEO whose career had been destroyed by the very ambitions she now struggled to manage. Victor had seen it all before: ruthless competitors, manipulative allies, and the suffocating weight of corporate survival. Caroline, he had said when she called, "You can't fight this alone. The moment you stop trusting yourself, it's over." His words resonated in her mind. The emotional toll of ambition had already cost him everything, and she could feel the same cost creeping up on her. She knew the stakes, but there was no turning back now. She had pushed so hard and for so long to make her empire untouchable. But Victor's warning lingered in the back of her mind. Don't let it consume you. It was a caution she had ignored before, and now she feared it might be too late. Victor's words echoed in Caroline's mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the corporate world had already taken too much from her. When the door to her office opened, it was like stepping into a different reality. Her assistant, Claire, entered with a message, a reminder of the looming quarterly results meeting. Caroline had been pushing everything forward, trying to hold the company together with sheer will. But as she met Claire's eyes, she could see the concern there. Claire, who had always been a pillar of support, was now becoming an unwitting witness to Caroline's unraveling. "Are you sure you're okay?" Claire asked, her voice soft, a hint of worry creeping in. Caroline hesitated, her lips parting to speak, but no words came. She had always been able to lie her way through these moments, but not now. Not anymore. She had always controlled the narrative, but now she was questioning everything. Her decisions, her alliances, her very path forward. "I'm fine," Caroline finally said, but the lie felt hollow, even to her. She had crossed so many lines, and in doing so, she had lost the trust of those she cared for most. The meeting the next day was a blur. Caroline entered the boardroom to a sea of familiar faces, but it felt different now. The room that once represented power now seemed cold, distant. As she spoke about the company's future, her words lacked the conviction they once held. She could see it in their eyes. The board members were no longer convinced. Every word she spoke was met with hesitation, uncertainty. It felt as though she were losing control, inch by inch. Lawrence was sitting across the table, his usual smug expression replaced with one of calculated focus. He wasn't just a competitor anymore. He was a looming presence, a reminder of how quickly power could slip away. But it wasn't just Lawrence that she had to contend with. The murmurs of discontent were rising within her own team. The realization hit her hard. She had lost their trust, and without that, she had nothing. The weight of the room pressed down on her chest. She fought to hold it together, but deep down, she knew that she was losing. That night, Caroline stood at her office window, looking out at the city below. The skyline, once a symbol of her hard-earned success, now felt like a reminder of everything slipping through her fingers. She had worked so hard to get here, to build this empire, but at what cost? She had betrayed herself in the process. Victor's warning continued to echo in her mind. She had been consumed by ambition, and now it was too late to undo the damage. She could feel the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. Caroline had always prided herself on being in control, but now, for the first time, she felt utterly powerless. The city below, teeming with life, seemed so distant. She was alone, and the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had no one left to trust, not even herself. The next morning, Caroline received a message from her former mentor, Victor. "It's not too late, Caroline. You can still change the course, but you have to decide if you want to. Don't let it end like this." His words were a lifeline, a spark in the darkness, but Caroline knew it was up to her to make the final choice. She wasn't sure she had the strength to rise again, but one thing was clear: she couldn't let herself be consumed by the same ambition that had led her this far. The time for revenge, for power, was over. What mattered now was survival, both personal and professional. As she stared at her phone, the weight of Victor's message sinking in, Caroline made a vow to herself she would rebuild. But this time, on her own terms. She had to reclaim her soul before she could ever hope to reclaim her company. The truth had finally surfaced. Caroline's world came crashing down when the shocking revelation hit her. Trusted CFO, Mark Thomas, had been orchestrating her downfall all along. Caroline sat motionless in her office, the air heavy with disbelief. For months, she had trusted Mark. He was her right-hand man, the one who guided her through every corporate decision, the one she confided in when the pressures of leadership became too much. But now, it was clear he had been playing her, manipulating her for his own gain. The documents in front of her confirmed it: offshore accounts, hidden transactions, and a plan to systematically weaken Caroline's influence within the company. The betrayal was beyond anything she had imagined. As the details unraveled before her, Caroline felt the ground beneath her give way. The person who she had relied on the most was the one who had been plotting her downfall all along. Her heart raced, and the anger that built within her was something she had never felt before. She had been played, but now it was time to turn the tables. She would confront Mark, but she knew it had to be done carefully. The stakes were higher than ever, and one wrong move could be her last. The confrontation was inevitable. Caroline called Mark into her office, the air tense with unspoken words. Mark walked in with his usual confident stride, unaware of the storm brewing. As he sat down, Caroline didn't waste. She opened the folder in front of her and slid the documents across the table. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with a fury she had never shown before. Mark's face changed in an instant. His calm demeanor shattered as he realized the game was up. He tried to deflect, his words smooth but unconvincing. "Caroline, you don't understand," he started, but she interrupted him, her voice sharp. "No, Mark, I understand perfectly. You've been working behind my back, plotting with Lawrence to take this company from me, and now I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Mark's eyes flickered with panic, but he quickly regained his composure. "You don't have the power to destroy me, Caroline," he said coldly. "It's already too late." But Caroline wasn't listening. She had already made her decision. The game was far from over. As the confrontation reached its peak, Mark tried to salvage his position with a final desperate plea. "Caroline, we can still make this work. You don't have to do this. Think about the company." His voice was strained, but the arrogance was still there. Caroline didn't flinch. She had heard enough. "You were never part of this company, Mark," she said coldly. "You were only ever in it for yourself." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "The company will be better without you. And so will I." Mark stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. He stormed out of the office, his face red with rage. Caroline remained seated, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had finally seen through the mask of the man who had been her closest ally. The weight on her shoulders, though far from gone, felt lighter now. She had taken back control, but as Mark's figure disappeared down the hallway, Caroline knew this battle was only just beginning. The next steps would be crucial, but she was ready. She would not back down. As Mark left, Caroline knew the hardest part was still ahead. She had exposed his betrayal, but Lawrence was still a looming threat. He had been playing his own game all along, and Caroline knew that his next move would be even more dangerous. But for the first time in a long while, Caroline felt a sense of purpose return. She had been knocked down, but she had survived. Now she was ready to fight back, to take on Lawrence and anyone else who stood in her way. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed to rebuild her alliances, starting with those who had remained loyal to her through the chaos. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. Her former mentor, Victor. She needed his guidance, his wisdom, more than ever. As the phone rang, Caroline stared out at the city below. It was time to reclaim her future. The next morning, Caroline gathered her team, those who had remained loyal, and shared her plan. She would not let Lawrence or Mark dictate the future of the company. "We're taking back what's ours," she said, her voice firm. The room was filled with nods of agreement, and for the first time in weeks, Caroline felt the power of unity in the room. The betrayal, the loss, all of it had led her to this moment. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival, about showing everyone that ambition, when used wisely, could build something stronger than before. As the meeting concluded, Caroline stood up, her mind focused, ready to face the challenges ahead. The journey was far from over, but she wasn't walking it alone anymore. The boardroom was electric with tension. Caroline stood at the head of the table, ready to reclaim control. Lawrence had ruled the company for too long, but now Caroline was taking back her power. "You think you've won?" she said, her voice unwavering. "This company belongs to those who built it, not you," Lawrence sneered. But Caroline was prepared. She had the legal documents and the public backing to counter his every move. "This ends today," Caroline declared, determination burning in her eyes. Lawrence's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "You're out of your depth," he shot back. But Caroline didn't back down. The battle for the company's future had begun, and she wasn't walking away. Just as Caroline felt she was gaining ground, Lawrence revealed his trump card, a covert alliance with a major investor who controlled enough shares to secure the company for himself. The revelation hit Caroline like a punch to the gut. She had fought so hard to regain control, but now the game had shifted again. "You don't have the power to stop this," Lawrence said, his smirk widening. Caroline's mind raced, but she wasn't defeated yet. She had one last move to make, one final strategy to reclaim what was hers. The company wasn't his to take, not without a fight. Caroline knew she couldn't win this battle alone. She turned to Ethan Walker, male, who had always been her most loyal ally. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "we need to go public. It's the only way to expose Lawrence for what he is." Ethan nodded, already on board with her plan. The idea was risky, but Caroline had no other choice. With the media backing her, they could expose Lawrence and the shady investor behind him. Caroline's resolve hardened. "The truth will come out," she said firmly, ready to take back the company one step at a time. The media storm hit fast. Caroline stood in front of the press, her voice clear and commanding as she exposed Lawrence's dealings with the investor. The room was filled with flashing cameras as she spoke, detailing the truth. "I won't let anyone tear down what we've built," Caroline said, her words cutting through the chaos. The public now knew the truth. Lawrence's smug confidence faltered, and Caroline could see the tide beginning to turn in her favor. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of control return. But she knew this was only the beginning. The battle was far from over, but she had won this round. The battle was won, but the cost was clear. Caroline sat at her desk, staring at the empty boardroom. The company was hers again, but at what price? She had lost allies, fought countless battles, and seen the worst of what ambition could bring. But she had also learned invaluable lessons about herself. Caroline had reclaimed her legacy, but she knew she couldn't return to the woman she once was. She had fought for control, but now she needed to lead with a new perspective, one shaped by the hard-earned wisdom of battle. As the sun set over the city, Caroline realized her journey was only just beginning.